They say if you hear a voice calling you in the dark, don't respond. But what if it's your mother, or your best friend, or your own voice whispering from the closet? Once you listen, it listens back. Our first story takes us deep into military housing, where two boys and their younger brothers heard something they were never meant to hear. It began with a whisper from the woods, gentle, familiar, and completely wrong. Carl and I were inseparable, like two peas in a pod, from the moment we learned how to build a fire. We were just a couple of 9-year-olds, spending our summer in a rural military housing zone, surrounded by miles of pine and no internet. His dad was stationed at the nearby base, and mine was a mechanic who worked on tanks. We weren't allowed to go beyond the clearing, but no one enforced that when your parents needed you out of their hair. It was Carl's idea to camp in the backyard. Just 2 sleeping bags, a flashlight, and my little brother Nate and my younger brother Devon squeezed between us in the tent. The forest stretched out behind the backyard like a thick black curtain, and even back then, something about it felt off. It was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of calm. It was the kind of quiet that made your ears ring, that made you feel like you were being watched. That night was cool, not cold. The sky was clear, and we told stupid jokes under the stars. We played a card game until the flashlight battery started dying. Then Carl said, "Hey, quiet. You hear that?" We froze. At first I didn't hear anything, just cicadas buzzing. Then, clear as day, Jakey, soft, close. My mum's voice. It was warm, the way she called me when I scraped my knee or got scared after a thunderclap. Except she wasn't there. She and Carl's parents had driven into town 20 minutes away to see a movie and grab dinner. We were alone. Jakey, it said again, gentle as a lullaby. I turned to Carl, my breath caught mid-exhale, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking toward the trees, frozen. And then he said, in a tiny whisper, "That's my mom's voice." "No," I said, shaking. "That's my mom." We both stared into the trees, too scared to move, and then it called again. "Carl." I swear to you, swear on everything, that it came from the same place. No footsteps, no rustling branches, just voices. My mother's, then his. Then Nate sat up. "Mum's back?" he asked groggily, rubbing his eyes. "I heard her." "No," Carl snapped. "She's not. But I heard her." "So did I whispered. "But she's not back." We all sat there, dead silent, listening. It didn't say anything else, but the forest felt aware. It's as if something knew we were listening now. Carl turned on the flashlight, but the battery had dropped so low that it only flickered. We zipped up the tent, even though it was sweltering inside and none of us slept. The next morning, we didn't tell our parents. We didn't tell anyone. I think we were afraid it would sound like a prank, or worse, like we were nuts. And after a few weeks, we just stopped talking about it. Eventually, Carl's family moved to another base, and mine transferred to Missouri. Life happened, and we lost touch. 12 years later, I ran into Carl at a gas station off A90. It was a total accident. We screamed like idiots, hugged and caught up. He was working as a freelancer in the IT field now. He was passing through for a job interview. We grabbed a beer that night, It took about 2 drinks before he brought it up. Do you remember that night in the tent? I paused, slowly nodded. You remember the voice? He asked. How it switched? I never told anyone, I said. But yeah, I've never heard anything like that again. Carl shook his head. I have. He told me that 6 months after the campout, he was home alone. His parents were grocery shopping. Nate was upstairs playing a video game. Carl was in the kitchen when he heard someone walking in the hallway. His mom's voice said, "Hey sweetheart, can you come help me?" He went to the hallway. No one there. Then, clear as anything, his dad's voice this time from the guest room. "Come here, son." Carl turned to run, but stopped when Nate yelled from upstairs, "Did you call me?" They both heard it. Different voices, at the same time. Again. I wish that were the end of it. I do. But something changed after we talked, like we cracked open a door we weren't supposed to. A week later, I was home late after work. I lived alone in a rental duplex, surrounded by woods. It was cheap and quiet. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it again. Jakey. I dropped the toothbrush. The voice had come from inside the house. I crept down the hallway and found my bedroom light on. I never left it on. I inched toward the doorway. The room looked untouched, but on the bed, my comforter had been pulled back, just like how my mum used to tuck me in. I backed out of the room and decided to sleep in my car that night. I moved out a week later. Over the next year, Carl and I started calling it the Mimic. That's what it felt like. It wore their voices like Halloween masks. It wasn't content to contact us. It wanted to pretend. It was learning how to be us, or someone we trusted. We started researching. At first, we figured it was sleep paralysis, maybe audio hallucinations. But the voices never came during sleep, and we weren't dreaming. Then we found a thread, an old forum discussing mimics, voice thieves, and skin whispers. Most were urban legends, but a few stories stood out. People in rural areas, often as kids, hearing loved ones calling from places they couldn't be. People who listened to their sibling's voice while watching them sleep beside them. People who heard their voice, mocking them from outside. The entity, whatever it was, feeds on fear, and when it knows your name, it doesn't leave. The last time I saw Carl, he looked tired, grayer, even though we weren't 30 yet. We met at a roadside diner, neutral territory. He told me something that chilled me more than anything I'd read online. It's not just voices anymore. What do you mean? He hesitated. I saw my dad last week, except my dad's dead, been gone 2 years. But I saw him in my hallway. He looked right at me. Did he say anything? Carl shook his head, just smiled. He paused. Then he said, "Jakey." I stopped sleeping after that. At night, I started hearing voices outside the window. Familiar ones. My ex, my old teacher. My voice whispering things I've never said out loud. I kept all the windows shut, but I could feel it moving, room to room, just outside the walls. Sometimes I'd find muddy footprints by the back door. Sometimes I'd wake up with the closet door open. One night, it knocked, just 3 times, patient, calm. And then, "Jake, it's me. Let me in." The voice broke halfway through the sentence, started as my brother's voice, but ended as Carl's. Carl stopped returning calls after that. His phone went dead. I drove by his last known address. His landlord said he moved out without warning. He left everything behind, no forwarding address. The mimic hasn't spoken in a few months, but I feel it. It's not gone. I see movement in mirrors, too slow to be mine. I hear water dripping when no faucets are running. The lights flicker when I speak my name aloud. It's waiting. I think it learns through repetition, through emotion, through fear. I think it wants you to hear it, because once you do, it never stops. And the next time it calls your name, it might use my voice. Some voices speak softly, others demand to be let in. The following story doesn't start with a whisper, it begins with a knock. But what happens when you ignore it? What happens when it keeps coming back? I used to tell people I lived in the middle of nowhere, but that's not true. Nowhere is where the noise is. Animals, wind, echoes. Where I grew up, just outside Glenmore, Ontario, was quieter than anywhere. My parents bought the house in 2001, a stone and timber farmhouse built sometime in the mid-1800s. The house title said 1848, but there were no historical registry, no photos, no real records. The land had been unused since the 1950s and was cheap enough that my parents could afford to restore it from the ground up. It was the kind of place where people dream about retiring to. Remote, quiet, charming, if you're into crooked porches and wind-whistling chimneys. But no one ever asked why it was empty for 50 years. I was 12 when it happened. Canada Day. My parents had gone to a celebration at the lake about 30 minutes away and trusted me to stay home. I was a quiet kid. Reclusive, I guess. I liked the stillness. I enjoyed watching old movies and pretending I lived in someone else's world. That night, I was watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail in the living room, with the windows open and a fan blowing warm air around. The sun had just dipped past the trees. The sky was still pink and gold when I heard the first knock. Not a bang, a knock. Gentle, 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I paused the movie and waited. Then came the second round, harder this time, more urgent. Knock, knock, knock. The front door was around the corner. I crept over and peeked through the side window, expecting to see my mum or dad early, maybe holding some burnt sausages and laughing. But no one was there, just the gravel path, the empty field, the thick black trees beyond it. I didn't open the door. The next knock didn't come from the front. It came from the back. It was louder, not polite, heavy, solid, like a fist slamming into the wood. I jumped and looked toward the kitchen. Again, 3 bangs, then 4, then silence. I checked every window. I turned off the movie. I whispered, "Hello." Nothing. Then from the far end of the hallway upstairs, bang. A door slammed shut, followed by another one opening. I didn't move. I was frozen there, halfway between the kitchen and the living room, and something in me said, "Don't call out again." So I didn't. I backed toward the fireplace, gripping the landline. That's when the house erupted. Not visually, Nothing fell, nothing shattered. But all at once, there was this booming, like something huge and furious was stomping and pounding through the floorboards and walls, slamming against furniture. I couldn't move. I heard things breaking, but later found everything untouched. The ceiling above me creaked as though something ran across it. The hallway thudded like it was being battered with fists. And then came the worst part. The voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was low, female, almost soft. And it said, "Let me in." I ran into the kitchen and locked the basement door, even though no one used it but us. I called the police. I remember whispering into the phone that someone was in the house and they were destroying it. The dispatcher told me to hide and stay calm. I crouched in the pantry, holding the receiver like it was a crucifix. The noise went on for what felt like 10 full minutes. And then it stopped, not gradually, not fading, just off, like someone flipped a switch. When the police showed up, I bolted from the pantry and into their arms. I remember shaking, crying. They searched the house, top to bottom. No one was there. No footprints outside, no damage inside. Nothing moved, nothing broken. Nothing was scratched or overturned. The basement was locked. The attic is still sealed. My parents came home half an hour later and thought I was playing a prank or having a panic attack. I wasn't. I never felt the same in that house again. You'd think that would be the end of it. A one-time event, an overactive imagination, a vivid hallucination in the dead of summer. But it didn't end. It just shifted. My parents began arguing more after that night. They said it was the isolation. But I noticed how my dad started sleeping with the bedroom door locked. How my mum would wake up crying, whispering, "It's not your fault," to no one. The dog we adopted 2 months later refused to go near the front door. She'd growl at it. She'd bark at the corners of the house where nothing stood. And me, I started dreaming of that voice, of her. She never showed her face, only said my name, sometimes in my mother's voice, sometimes in mine, sometimes in a voice I didn't recognize, but one that felt like it belonged to me, like it was coming from inside me. We moved out when I turned 17. By then, the house felt empty in a way I can't explain, like something had left, or worse, was lying dormant, waiting. The house sold quickly to a young couple, no kids. They lasted 2 years before leaving in the middle of the night. Their realtor listed the house again 6 months later. No one's bought it since. I visited once, 10 years after that night. It was overgrown. The windows were covered in plywood. The porch sagged. Someone had spray painted the front door in red letters. There were 3 words, "Do not knock." I haven't told many people about this, and I don't expect anyone to believe me. But lately, since the nightmares returned, I've started thinking about what that thing was. Not a ghost, not a burglar, but something older, something that mimics, a parasite. It didn't want the house. It wanted in. And I think, God help me, I think I invited it. Not by opening the door, but by not opening it. It wanted to be acknowledged, to be known. And now, every once in a while, when I stay somewhere too long, Airbnbs, hotels, even friends' basements, I hear knocking again. Not loud, just polite. 3 soft knocks. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I don't. But no matter where I go, eventually the door knocks again. And the voice, no matter who it sounds like, always knows my name. It doesn't always want to come in through the front door. Sometimes it waits until you love someone, until you trust them completely, and then it finds a way in, through the cracks in your heart. I always loved sleeping over at Kayla's place. Her house sat nestled on a slope just outside town, modest, overgrown, isolated in the way that felt romantic when you were 17 and stupid. The basement was ours. We pushed the old love seat up against the wall, surrounded it with candles and incense, and told each other we were protected. I believed in that stuff more than she did. Kayla laughed when I saged the corners. She said it made the place smell like burnt Fruit Loops. I laughed too, even though I noticed how her smile always faded just a little when the smoke drifted toward the stairwell. The nightmares started on the 3rd night I stayed over in a row. I remember because I wrote about them the next morning. Not in detail, just enough to capture the feel. I wrote, she had holes in her chest, 1 white, 1 black. I felt things when I looked into them. Real things. Too real. At first, I chalked it up to stress. We were finishing finals. Kayla's mum was going through something. I never got the whole story, but she cried a lot when she thought we couldn't hear her. Kayla said she was fine. I wanted to believe her. But the dreams didn't stop. Each night, I'd drift off to the sound of that old basement dehumidifier rattling against the wall and wake up drenched in sweat, heart hammering. And always, I saw the same image. Kayla, lying shirtless in the dark, silent, calm. Her chest was bare except for those 2 gaping orbs. They weren't wounds. They didn't bleed. They pulsed. The black one felt like staring into guilt, shame, dread that wasn't mine, but it still crushed me. I'd start crying in the dream, real tears. I could feel them sliding down my cheeks. The white one was worse. It felt like I was being watched. The emotions they gave me weren't random. They were responses. When I stared at the black hole, Kayla would twitch, eyes darting beneath her lids. The dream would shift, walls would twist, sounds would bend. Sometimes I heard a woman's voice screaming in a language I didn't know. When I stared at the white hole, she would stop, but only for a moment. Then she'd whisper, "She's lying to you." One night, I didn't wake up right away. The dream deepened, or maybe it changed. I was sitting beside her bed, but Kayla wasn't asleep anymore. She looked dead. Her mouth hung open just a little. Her eyes were glassy. And from under the bed, a hand reached out. Thin, long-fingered, light brown. And then the whisper, "I see you now." That's when I woke up. Except I didn't. I was lying on the love seat, same as every night. Kayla was asleep beside me, arm across my waist. But the air felt wrong, thick, like the oxygen had been strained through damp cotton. I couldn't move at first. Sleep paralysis, I thought. It had happened before. Then I heard her voice again. This time, not in my head, not in the dream. It came from the space beneath the love seat. "You brought her here. Now let me see you." I jerked upright so hard I knocked the incense tray off the side table. Kayla startled awake, groaning. I told her it was a bad dream and didn't say anything else. That day, I stayed home, and she came with me. She didn't whisper again, not at first, but I could feel her. At night, I'd sense her near the closet. I stopped sleeping. I left the lights on, but nothing helped. Eventually, I went back to Kayla's house, desperate for some control, thinking that if I returned to the source, I could make it stop. Instead, Kayla told me something I wasn't ready to hear. "I've seen her too," she said. I didn't breathe. She looked ashamed when she said it. Not first, but sometimes when I'm alone down here, I hear her. She says weird stuff like that I'm hollow, that you'll see it eventually. I looked at her, and the dream image snapped into focus. Her chest open and exposed. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kayla shrugged. "You wouldn't have believed me." "But she's real." "I know." Then Kayla said her name. Lilith. I think that's what she calls herself. My stomach turned, because that name didn't fit. It felt too clean, too biblical, too known. Like a label we slap on something to pretend we understand it. She wasn't Lilith. She was something older. She started talking more after that. Sometimes in the mirror, sometimes in the shower, right in the space behind the curtain. I saw her reflection once, briefly, in the corner of the bathroom mirror. Not directly. The image was wrong, blurred, like an oil painting underwater. But her face was there, and her mouth didn't move. Yet I heard her clearly as anything. "She doesn't love you the way you love her, but I do." I stopped answering her, stopped reacting. That made her angrier. The final night I stayed at Kayla's, everything fell apart. We were sitting on the floor playing an old co-op game. I was finally starting to forget her voice and was able to laugh again. Kayla leaned in and kissed my shoulder. That's when the lights went out. Not the power, just the light in the room. The TV stayed on. The sound didn't stop, but the room dimmed like something had sucked the warmth out of it. And then she froze. Kayla stared straight ahead, eyes wide. I called Kayla's name. She didn't answer. Then slowly, her head turned toward me, but her face didn't move right. It tilted, lagging behind the motion. Like it wasn't quite connected. Her mouth opened, but what came out wasn't her voice. She sees you when you dream. She wears your love like a coat. Then just as suddenly, Kayla blinked, looked confused. "What?" she said. "Why are you staring at me like that?" I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't sleep that night. And then she did something new. She touched me. I woke up to pressure on my chest. Not pain, weight, as though someone was kneeling on me. I opened my eyes, and for just a split second, I saw her face inches from mine. And then, worse than anything, her hand reached down and into me. No blood, no wound, just in. Like my chest wasn't solid. Like I had holes now too. And I felt what Kayla must have felt. The hollowness, the emptiness. The fear was that the love I gave and the love I received were never equal. That I had poured something into her that she had continuously fed on. And I saw it clearly. She wasn't haunting Kayla. She was feeding off both of us. She didn't want to possess. She didn't want to kill. She wanted to be loved, so she could devour it. Kayla and I broke up a week later. I didn't tell her why. I told her I needed time. I had school stuff to focus on. She didn't argue, but she didn't seem surprised either. I think she knew. I don't sleep well anymore. I can't fall in love. Not really. Every time I feel something new for someone, I hear her voice again. Does she see the holes in you now? And I wonder if maybe that's the curse. Not the dreams, not the whispers, but the fact that I'll never know for sure if she ever really left. 3 voices, 3 victims, and yet the same insidious pattern. It spoke in words we trusted. It wore the people we loved like masks. And when we gave it attention, when we listened, it learned more than just our names. It learned our weaknesses. Maybe it's not a ghost. Perhaps it's not a demon. Maybe it's something older, something hungry, something that waits for silence and listens for the moment you answer back. So the next time someone you love calls your name in the dark, ask yourself, is that really them?